attorney, and my work is primarily in wills and estates. I knew during law school that this was an area that I was interested in, so one of my professors suggested that I do an internship at a firm that specializes in probate litigation. For those who don't know, probate is the process by which a deceased person's will is proven valid or invalid. So I spent a summer here in Dallas, working at a probate litigation firm. I saw some weird things during that time, like a woman who tried to leave $2 million to her cats, and a man who left everything to a high school girlfriend he hadn't seen in over 50 years. It was about 2 weeks into my internship when I realized I had run out of things to wear to work. In my life as a student, I wore mostly jeans, and I wasn't really in a place to break the bank on a whole new work wardrobe for the summer. So I was on a very limited 3-suit rotation, hoping nobody would notice the frequency with which I was repeating outfits. The next weekend, I was running errands when I drove past a sign that directed passersby to an estate sale on a side street. Not only was I desperate for some inexpensive business attire, but I love estate sales. And thrift stores and consignment stores. I mean, anyone can go to North Park and come out with 100 cute things. But me, I like a challenge. I like looking through old, unwanted things and finding a way to make them pretty again. So whenever I see an estate sale sign, I usually have to stop in and see what treasures are there, just waiting for me to find them. On this particular Saturday, I followed the sign and walked into what was a very lovely home. I found 3 suitable work shirts, parted with $7 to make them mine, and left feeling like it had been a very successful stop. I dropped the shirts off at the dry cleaners on the way home and then forgot about them for 2 weeks, as one does. When I finally remembered to pick up my new shirts, I decided to work one of them into my 3-suit rotation the next morning. It was a nice blue silk blouse. Jane, one of the attorneys that I worked with, noticed that for the first time in over a month, I was wearing something she hadn't seen every other day. "Cute shirt," she said. I said thanks. I didn't bother to tell her where I'd gotten it. Jane came back to my desk a few minutes later and asked me if I had time to go to court with her that day to observe a prove-up. A prove-up is what we call the probate process for an uncontested will, she told me. It's pretty basic, but it would be good for you to see one if you haven't yet. This seemed like a good opportunity for me to learn something new and get away from my desk for a little while. "That sounds great," I said, and we headed to the courthouse. As we drove from the office, Jane started telling me about our client. The firm had handled the probate of his father's will several years earlier, and now we were handling his mother's. "Steve is really nice," she said to me. "You'll enjoy meeting him." And he was really nice. He kind of gave me a funny look when I introduced myself. He said something about me looked familiar, so we played the, "Oh, do you know so-and-so?" game for a little while. He had kids about my age, and we didn't know each other, but we had some mutual friends. And we discovered that I had actually volunteered with his wife many years earlier. "Wow, what a small world," we both exclaimed. Then Jane started to talk business. She asked Steve about the status of some tasks that, as executor of the estate, he had to complete. "Everything is moving along," Steve answered. "I set up a separate bank account for the estate, and I have been using that to pay for the expenses of administration. It has all of Mom's liquid assets, and we deposited the proceeds from the estate sale 2 weeks ago." "Oh," said Jane, "I didn't know you'd already had an estate sale." "Yes," said Steve, "it went really well. We put a sign out on the main road and actually got a lot of traffic. We were able to clear most things out that weekend. In fact, we just listed the house for sale, a little sooner than we expected." "Is it on Timber Creek Lane?" I blurted out, almost yelling, before I could stop myself. "Yeah, it is," Steve answered with a puzzled look on his face. And then I tried to say something like, "Oh, yes, I saw that sign on the main road because I drove past it, and then I kept driving, definitely did not stop. And I just remember seeing the sign there from when I was driving." But I couldn't. In fact, I couldn't say anything because that was the moment when I realized I had shown up to the courthouse to probate Steve's mother's will wearing her shirt. So I just stood there, and my face started getting really red, and my eyes kept getting bigger and bigger, and I just kept standing there. And then I remembered I had actually seen Steve when I was in the house. He was the older man moving furniture, and he was like wearing a baseball cap and gym clothes. I hadn't recognized him at first here, out of context, but it was him. And as I got redder and my eyes began to bug out in a kind of dangerous way, Steve's face went white, and his eyes narrowed a bit, and I could tell he was placing me and my shirt. And then nobody spoke for about 25 seconds. We just stood there having the world's ugliest staring contest. What with my bug eyes and his ghost white face. I wanted to say something, anything. Like, I didn't know your mother, but I just want to tell you that I think she had excellent taste. Or maybe, wow, what a small world. Or maybe just, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that I'm here right now wearing your mother's shirt. But none of those things felt like the right thing to say. All of my education and training had failed to prepare me for this particular situation. So I said nothing, and Steve said nothing. Now Jane, who had been looking through her notes, had no idea what was going on. She looked up and asked Steve a question about letters testamentary. He answered her, and thus ended our shared eternity of staring at each other in painful silence. About that time, it was our turn to go before the probate judge. I sat on the back row of the courtroom, observing Jane and wishing I had brought my suit jacket inside instead of leaving it in the car. I suddenly felt very exposed in my blue silk blouse. Steve was very gracious as we parted ways. He thanked Jane and said he'd be in touch. Without ever really looking at me, he wished me the best of luck with school and my career. I said thank you, in a tone that I hoped would convey, I'm sorry, I feel like an asshole. Jane and I went back to the office, and my eyes returned to my eye sockets where they belong. I didn't get any real work done that afternoon. I just sat at my desk, staring at the computer, trying to figure out what this meant and how I felt about it. Part of me felt this weirdly beautiful sense of connection with everyone and everything. Part of me just felt shame about the fact that I buy used clothing, sometimes from the recently deceased. I've thought about what I might say to Steve if we were to meet again. I think I'd probably still say nothing. I've come to believe that there are situations where it's best to not give a voice to the elephant in the room. Sometimes there are no words that will ease the pain or discomfort, or if there are words, maybe you're not the right person to speak them. And in those situations, maybe silence is okay. I still wear that shirt. In part because I like it, but also because it's a good reminder to live life today instead of waiting around for something better, something different, because before long we'll all be gone and someone else will be wearing our clothes.